Texas, Republican Conference Chairman, Representative Jeb Hensarling. Jeb, let's begin with you. Paul Ryan's a good friend of mine, and when you sit in that seat giving a response, and it's a friend, you're crossing your fingers, and you're going, God, please, no Bobby Jindal moments. I think Paul did okay, but let's talk about the message itself. How was his message different than the president's?
Well, it was substantially different. I mean, the two pressing questions at our time is how are we going to create more jobs? What are we going to do about this huge fiscal gap, which is spending driven? I mean, Paul Ryan is a guy who's actually put a solution on the table. You may not like his solution, but at least he's led. The president hasn't led. I mean, we all know that America is frankly in a spending trajectory that will bankrupt the next generation, that will harm the American dream. And unfortunately, last night we didn't hear leadership from him.
Were you not, though, Jeb? Were you not at least a bit relieved that the president talked about freezing discretionary non-defense spending for 5 years and cutting Pentagon spending? That's a step in the right direction, right?
Well, perhaps, but what I also heard was investment, 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 which the American people know is doubling down on the stimulus. Every time we hear investment, what the American people know is, well, that's going out to borrow another 40 cents on the dollar, mainly from the Chinese, and send the bill to our children and grandchildren. I mean, Joe, I did a rough back-of-the-envelope calculation, and what the president is saying is after expanding, inflating what we call non-defense discretionary by 84% over the last 2 years, I'm willing to level fund it for 5. I mean, that's the difference of like 0.3%. It means instead of spending $100, I'll spend $99.70. That's not going to save the country from bankruptcy, and we cannot be competitive with the Chinese if all we're going to do is borrow their money.
So Elijah, Andrea was talking earlier about the fact that it doesn't usually happen in the State of the Union, but these numbers the president was talking about last night, they just don't add up. He didn't talk about going after Social Security in a meaningful way, or curbing the rise of Medicare, or our defense spending. And this freeze, as Jeb points out, comes after increasing spending in these areas by 84%.
Yeah.
How do we get to a balanced budget?
I think the president was very broad. I didn't expect him to go line by line exactly.
You didn't expect a calculator?
No, I did not. But let me be clear. What the Republicans are now doing, according to Zandy, that is cutting billions of dollars, $60 billion in the next few months from the budget, is going to cause us to lose about quite a few jobs, 600,000 jobs. Now, you don't do that, Joe, when you're trying to create jobs. We were able to create a million last year, and so they're talking about just cut. I thought what the president did was very responsible. He was broad, but what he was trying to say was, look, come on, guys, you don't cut off our future. I mean, you just had a report a moment ago where 1% of our kids are efficient in science. Right. You know, we cannot go into the future and be competitive against anybody. But if we don't invest in certain things.
Now, though, in 1995, we got pounded when we talked about cutting certain programs. But Elijah, in 2011, don't you sense that Jeb's going to win this argument over you if you guys are debating whether to spend more money on new programs or cutting money from programs?
I don't think it's all about new programs. Keep in mind, what he's talking about is innovation. He's talking about education, and he's trying to, and that, by the way, that innovation leads to new jobs. I think that was basically the subject of what he was trying to say, and I think he helped to shape the spending debate. Right. He's saying, look, you know, he came in saying, look, yeah, we got to do some cutting. But let's cut responsibly, and let's not hurt the people that are already suffering, and let's create jobs. And again, I didn't expect him to have a blueprint of every little thing that he was going to be able to do. But I thought it was good. I thought it was a good start. And I think he came in, and keep in mind, we're talking about reaching out to the Republicans and saying, okay, let's try to work this out. They have their point, we have ours.
Let's go back to Jeb, Congressman. So let's respond to some of the criticisms of the Republican position. We're competing with China. They're moving ahead on infrastructure. They're moving ahead, obviously, in some areas on education. Is now the time to cut in these vital areas if it's really not going to be those cuts that are going to get us to a balanced budget?
Again, Joe, we've tried the president's plan. It was called the stimulus with interest, $1.2 trillion. That was all investment. And look what it brought us. I mean, with the exception of, I think, 3 months, unemployment has now hovered in the Obama administration near 10%. I mean, we haven't seen anything like this from the Great Depression. We tried that method. And so with a couple of notable exceptions, I mean, the president, although he had some great patriotic themes in his speech, it was combined with some very small, old, recycled ideas. One of the greatest threats we have to job creation today is, frankly, the uncertainty that job creators face because they know sooner or later this has to be paid for.
Now,
Either it's going to be paid for in
though,
huge taxes or it's going to be paid for in huge inflation, and that's harming job creation. And you can't help the job seeker by punishing the job creator. And unfortunately, that's what the policies of the president has done.
Let's expand this out to themes, broad themes. I was heartened as a small government conservative that believes the government can't create long-term jobs, that growth comes from the private sector. I was heartened by the president's tone because for the first time in a speech like this, he talked about job creators. He talked about helping small business owners. Will you give the president credit for that he seems to now understand that it's small business that drives this economy?
Well, I don't know what he understands, but yeah, there was a lot of the rhetoric I was heartened by. At least I don't hear the rhetorical attacks on job creators anymore. But, Joe, you know, I find myself in the usual position of agreeing with 80% of what the president says. I just disagree with 80% of what he does.
That's good.
That's great.
That's good. We have come together. Now, by the way, who did you sit with last night, Elijah?
I was supposed to sit with Gosar of Arizona, and the Arizona seats were all taken.
I don't believe that.
No, but what's the truth? It's
Were you not surprised like I was? You probably sat through, what, about 10 of these? Like
15.
15. Weren't you surprised by...
It was different.
The comedy was great.
Yes, it was.
People, I mean, I'm telling you, Republicans and Democrats, this is a changed place. We can have tough debates, but real respect there. Look at that. King and Anthony Weiner sitting together. This is out of Ghostbusters. Dogs and cats living together.
As a matter of fact, I hope we do it like this forever. Because it just, that up and down.
Yeah.
You know, my friends would say, look, Elijah, why are the Republicans sitting and you all
They all do that, don't they? It drives them crazy. And Jeb, who did you sit with the Democrat, Jeb?
Yeah, my date was Jim Clyburn. Now, he's not the prettiest date I've ever had, but he was good company.
Jeb, you were in very good company.
Great date.
I was in good company.
Well, Jeb, thank you so much for being with us, and we will not tell anybody in your district that you agreed with 80% that the president said.